One moment, we'll get the YouTube started. Okay, Mr. Chairman, we are live on YouTube.
Okay, thank you, Clarissa. Welcome to Senate Transportation, Highways, and Military Affairs this afternoon. I want to apologize right away for the fact that I left everybody hanging there for a few minutes. Full disclosure, I had an opportunity to go get the vaccination. So I had that appointment at 1 o'clock, and sorry to hold some folks up. Appreciate everyone's patience with that. I tell you what, let's call the meeting to order. And Clarissa, would you take the roll, please?
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. Senator Anderson.
Excused.
Senator Furphy.
Here.
Senator McEwen.
Excused.
Senator Pappas.
Here.
Chairman Landon.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Okay, thank you, Clarissa. Senator McEwen should be joining us here shortly. Senator Anderson, I believe, is en route back to Casper after being sworn in this morning. It was good to see him get that done and be on board for everything going forward. We are here this afternoon to take up Senate File 13, Abandoned Vehicles, Towing Service Liens and Titles, and Senate File 9, State Employee Moving Expenses. So let's take up Senate File 13 first. It looks like we've got hopefully some folks from the Department of Transportation who have been very patient with us this afternoon. I hope that maybe the director is here. Good to see you, Director Reiner. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Chairman, I'm glad to hear you got the shot because we want you healthy and strong.
Well, thank you very much. That there are some privileges to getting older. So, well, Director Reiner, really appreciate, again, you being patient with us. Would you walk us through Senate File 13, please?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee would be happy to. I'm joined today with some key members of the team, and we'll get them talking here pretty quick. For the record, Luke Reiner, Director of YDOT. And Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, really, this is a bill that really was not an original interim topic, but the topic came up at believe the second meeting we had from some concerns in industry. And the guidance from the chairman was, why not sit down with industry and let's see what we can do. And all concerned about some issues on abandoned vehicles. And my thanks, deep thanks to my staff, really primarily led by Lacey Bruckner and assisted by Taylor, but lots of others and industry to come to the table. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to pass the mic with your permission to Miss Lacey Bruckner, because there's some technical stuff in here and she's the master of it. So we'd like to pass the mic to her to explain the bill.
Thank you very much, Director Reiner. Really appreciate it. Ms. Bruckner, welcome this afternoon.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
Appreciate you being here with us. Walk us through Senate File 13.
Okay. Like Director Reiner had indicated, back in September, we were asked to put together a working group. So very quickly, I would just like to tell you what members were part of this group. We had members from the Towing Association. We had members from the County Clerks Association. We had members from the insurance industry and law enforcement, so that several parties that are affected by abandoned vehicles and lien sales could provide their input to hopefully bring something that would resolve the issues initially brought to your attention by the Towing Association. It's just a quick history on where this started. And if it's all right, we could just start going through the sections of this bill, if that's okay, Mr. Chairman?
Ms. Bruckner, absolutely. And by the way, I think we all appreciate the fact that you were willing to wade into the water. It can get pretty deep on this front from my old days on transportation. So I commend you for the effort, and let's see what you came up with. Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. So well, if we could just start with statute 29-7-101. This first section kind of addresses one of the initial concerns of the towing association, where the lien statutes referred them to use the warehouseman's lien process to dispose of vehicles that they get stuck with. But that was causing some issue for them. So this first addition to the statute on page 2, starting at line 9, clarifies that a towing and recovery service is not a warehouseman. The towing association had a legal counsel advise them that using the warehouseman's section of the statutes had some conflicts in other areas with relation to lien sales for vehicles. That piece came from the towing association, and I do believe that there is a member of the towing association that will participate in this meeting. She may be a little late, but she could probably speak more specifically to what their concerns were. Okay, so then moving down to statute 29-7-102, right of possession, removal of property, and filing a lien. So this section, these additions to this statute basically add some timelines for how long the towing and recovery service would have to wait before the vehicle, they can start the process of doing a lien sale for the vehicle. And it also sets up some specific procedures and information that they have to provide in order to hold a lien sale to dispose of the vehicle, specifically that they need to notify the last known owner of record that they have the vehicle, that their intent is to sell it through this lien sale process, and provide a specific vehicle information, the amount due to them for towing and storage services, whatever other expenses they may have endured for that, specify the time and place of the lien sale they intend to hold, so that the last known owner of record and any other lien holder out there, or any other interested party is aware of where the vehicle is, how much money is owed to release the vehicle to a person with a claim for it, and when and where the sale will be. And that carries into page 3, lines 1 through 9. So basically that states that they have to hold it for 30 days before they start this lien sale procedure, what information they have to provide to the last known owner of record, and in their notice of their lien sale, specific to the amount due, the specific vehicle information, and the date and time of the sale. And then on page 3, starting at line 15, this puts a limitation of 180 days that storage fees can accrue. This has been an issue in the past where vehicles under these circumstances have sat in a storage yard for 18 months, 24 months, and continuously accrued storage fees to the point where if there is another lien holder out there, those storage fees may end up being $8,000 or $9,000 and may be more than what the vehicle is worth to that lien holder or an insurance company or something like that. So this section, the addition of this section really just puts a time frame on that, makes sure that that property owner gets that ball rolling and gets the notices out and holds that lien sale before storage fees have the opportunity to accrue for 1 or 2 years.
Ms. Bruckner, we have a question from Senator Furphy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Along those same lines about the storage fees, are there standard towing fees? I sometimes get complaints from constituents. They say, wow, the towing fees were outrageous. But are there standard fees that these towing companies can charge per mile, et cetera?
Ms. Bruckner?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Furphy, there are not set fees in statute for towing and recovery service for the situation where a vehicle is going through the lien sale process. That process would be if a vehicle was towed at the request of law enforcement after an accident or after an arrest for some type of situation. Vehicle's towed, it's not abandoned by the owner, but it was towed off. And then if the towing and recovery service is stuck with it, they would go through this lien sale process to dispose of the vehicle when the rightful owner never bothered to pick up their vehicle and pay the fees. There are specific fees assigned to abandoned vehicles when they're abandoned on public property, because the counties have an abandoned vehicle fund that covers that for abandoned vehicles on the highway, for example. Law enforcement tows that off, the sheriff's department makes the notifications, and those fees for the tow and the storage fall to the county's abandoned vehicle fund. There are specific rates for that so that those county abandoned vehicles funds are not diminished. Did that answer your question, sir?
Yes.
That's
Thank you.
Ms. Bruckner, thanks. We may come back to that because I too have gotten phone calls on that front. And so thank you. We may come back to that. So please continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I believe that we have covered page 3, the timelines and what has to be in the lien sales statement, up to the definition of a vehicle. And that is just the same definition of a vehicle that applies to all of the operation of a vehicle on a highway and title and registration requirements. So moving on to page 4. This section currently in the statutes that cover titles, there is a provision for towing companies to apply for a junk title for vehicles that are worth less than $2,000. And that is so that they don't have to put forth the expense of advertising in a newspaper for 2 weeks for a vehicle that's worth nothing to them. It would cost more to get a title just to send to the crusher for maybe whatever the going rate for metal is, not a lot. So that junk title provision has been in the law for towing companies on abandoned vehicles since, I believe, 2016. This working group felt like it would be helpful for the towing industry to also be able to apply for a junk title on a vehicle that they end up with under the lien sale process, because just like abandoned vehicles, they end up towing vehicles that aren't abandoned, but that the rightful owner never bothered to come and pay the fees and pick up the car. That also is worth very little, and it's quite pricey for them to advertise in the newspaper and hold those things when they're not worth much.
Ms. Bruckner, we have a question from Senator Furphy.
I'm sorry to interrupt again, but just along these lines, I'm just curious, if the towing company, do they have to get a title if the vehicle's less than 2,000 and they're just going to take it to a junkyard? Do they have to go through the whole process of getting a title to be able to do that? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms.
Mr.
Bruckner?
Chairman, Senator Furphy, yes, at this time, in the titling requirements under Wyoming Statute 31-2104, there is not an exemption for a towing company to not apply for a title. How this process works, though, they can go through a lien sale process. So they will do a title search to find out who the last known owner of record is. They will send notice to that last known owner of record that they have the vehicle, provide a description of the vehicle and what fees are due. They also send that same notification to any other party with an interest to the vehicle. So that might be a lien holder or possibly an insurance company. And they also have to list the date and time of their public sale. So they are able to hold a public sale, sell that vehicle without getting a title in the towing company's name. If someone buys the car from that lien sale, the onus is on the buyer to go down and get a title, and the towing company will provide that buyer with the documentation necessary to take to the county clerk to go ahead and get a title, proving that those notices were sent and that sale was advertised in the paper. Currently, for the vehicles that are worth less than $2,000, if it's a lien sale situation, they do still have to go through that process. If it's an abandoned vehicle, they don't. The provision for abandoned vehicle junk titles is already established in 31-111. So we're just trying to give them that option for a junk title under the lien sale provisions as well. So they would still have to go get a title to do in their name to do a junk title. They would pay $5 for the title search fee and $15 for the title and $10 for a VIN inspection. The expenses they would save here would be the advertisements in the paper for 2 weeks. Does that answer your question, sir?
Senator Furphy, I think is good for now. Ms. Bruckner, please continue.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So basically, just to recap very quickly, under 31-111, this just provides for the towing companies to apply for a junk title, which is a little less expenses on vehicles under the lien sale process, like they are already doing for vehicles under the abandoned process. The exact same language, the exact same rules apply with this language that apply to a junk vehicle. With some minor exceptions to the notification process, there are some specific notifications for abandoned vehicles in Chapter 13 that wouldn't fit for a lien sale situation. With that, if we may move on to page 5, starts statute 31-13-104 that addresses abandonment on a highway or property. The only change to this statute is changing the retail value to a fair market value, which that starts actually on page 6, line 3. There was some inconsistencies in Chapter 13 relating to the value of an abandoned vehicle. In some areas, it talked about the retail value, and in some areas, it talked about fair market value. So for an abandoned vehicle, oftentimes they may not be in the best condition. And if using a retail value, that would be more like what a dealer would sell a used vehicle for. And when you search a value for a vehicle under a nationally recognized appraisal guide like NADA or Kelly Blue Book or Edmunds, they're going to give you clean retail fair retail, but in a lot of instances, these vehicles that are abandoned, they're in very dire condition. And so using a retail value may not be fair to the towing company or the storage facility that's stuck with this vehicle when its actual condition is maybe less than what the value of scrap is in a lot of cases. So it felt more appropriate, and the towing industry agreed to use a fair market value rather than a retail value that a dealer would use that you can find in any of those appraisal guides.
So, Ms. Bruckner, this, I'm assuming that most of the provisions of the bill were pretty much agreed upon by all of those constituent groups that you told us about when we started the meeting?
Mr. Chairman, yes, the Towing Association was supportive of this. The county clerk's office members that were part of this group did not have an issue with this. Neither did the insurance industry, the members from insurance industry that participated in this. There was no discussion or disagreeing positions on this issue
Okay. All right. Any
that
questions?
I was aware of.
Senators? Okay, please proceed, Ms. Bruckner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let's see. So the next item on page 7, this also is that same statute 3113-104, and starting on line 6, this is addressing the certified letters that the towing companies are required to send to the last known owner of record, letting them know the vehicle description, the amount due to have the vehicle released, and the date and time of the sale. The county clerk's representatives that participate in this group made the recommendation to add the requirement of a return receipt requested. That they had indicated that they had been questioned in the past on that because it didn't specifically state in the statute that they had to provide a return receipt. So that was a request from the County Clerks Association. And to my knowledge, the other members of the working group, the insurance industry or the towing industry or law enforcement, brought no issue with this to my attention. We did have a request from industry to add to this electronic tracking if available after return receipt requested. Again, I asked the county clerk representatives for our working group if any of them took issue to that. None of them did. They were supportive of that, and some of them said they already accept that in lieu of a certified mail return receipt.
So, Ms. Bruckner, I'm sorry to, we have spent a lot of time on mail already this session. I just think that's kind of fascinating, but return receipt requested. Is that just a normal letter that you put a card in there and I'm supposed to send it back to the towing company? Is that what we're talking about? What is covered underneath return receipt requested?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, what that is you send it certified mail, and then when it's delivered to the recipient, they sign for it, and then that piece of the card that the recipient signs is returned back to the sender. And that is their proof that the last known owner of record or the lien holder, the recipient of that document, received it. When you use electronic tracking through FedEx, UPS, the post office, any of those, they have electronic tracking, which does the same thing. It'll tell you play by play when your piece of mail will be delivered and when it was received by the addressee on the letter. So it pretty much does the same thing. And it sounded to me like most of the county clerks would accept that electronic record in lieu of the little card that you used to get now. Does that answer your question, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Bruckner. I just, we've heard all kinds of different stories about certified mail just in the last week. And so my wheels are turning with regard to how effective this is, but hopefully this will help a little bit if they get the return receipt. So thank you. Please
Thank you, Mr.
proceed unless there's other questions. Okay.
So going further down on page 7, line 22, that just corrects that retail value to a fair market value again, which is more appropriate for abandoned vehicles that are in a condition that is less than retail. Moving on to page 8, line 21 also just corrects that retail value to a fair market value. And then moving on to page 9, Wyoming Statute 3113-109. This addresses vehicles that are left abandoned on private property and sold by the property owner. If you look on, starting on line 16, there's some language in this paragraph that the working group felt appropriate to be removed. The language talks about an establishment for repair, towing, service, storage, that after 30 days after consent for a person to leave a vehicle at their place of business, that it can be abandoned. This is another piece that was causing the confusion that led the Towing Association to bring these concerns to the Transportation Committee, because this language was confusing and a little bit conflicting with the same circumstances that lent themselves for a vehicle to fall under the storage lien statutes under Title 29. So our working group felt that a good way to resolve that issue would be to remove this language from the abandoned vehicle section. Then you are clarifying in what circumstance a vehicle is truly abandoned and in what circumstance it actually should go under the storage lien sale process. So we suggested removing the language that talks about vehicles being left at service, repair, towing, recovery, maintenance, business. They are considered abandoned 30 days after consent has expired for the vehicle to be at that place of business. That situation, there is a contract in place to start with where the towing company, the repair shop, the maintenance shop, the storage facility has agreed to tow, repair, store a vehicle. There's even a verbal or written contract there. And then the owner of the vehicle leaves it and doesn't come and pay the fees due to that place of business. That really lends itself more to a storage lien process or a lien sale process than an abandoned vehicle. But it was the same situation was addressed in both Title 29 lien sales and Title 31, Chapter 13, abandoned vehicles. So that's why the group felt it appropriate to remove this language here to clarify that and clear up some of that confusion.
Questions, committee? I'm really spurring the horse in a couple of these spots, Ms. Bruckner, to stay up with you. I've got to study that particular piece that you just described, you know. I don't completely understand it, but you did well. I mean, I hope the other two senators are out ahead of me as usual. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And please, if you need me to clarify any of that further or explain it, I would be more than happy to do that. If we move on to page 10, starting at line 2, this talks about the requirement for the towing company or any other private property owner who has an abandoned vehicle. After 30 days, they're required to do a title search, identify the last known owner of record, and send a notice of the abandoned vehicle sale under this section of the law. This was another issue that was presented by the Towing Association because in another paragraph of Chapter 13, towing companies are required to notify the Sheriff's Department within 30 minutes of a tow of an abandoned vehicle. This is also in Chapter 13. They're required to do that title search submit the paperwork within 3 days. 3 business days, and YDOT is required to turn around and provide those title search results to the towing company within 5 to 7 days. And then within 10 days of that initial tow, they're required to get the letter out to the last known owner of record and any lien holders of record. The reason for that is so that the interested parties with the vehicle are notified right away that this vehicle was towed. Here are the fees, this is where it's at. There was an issue because the abandoned vehicle statutes under this section, 3113-109, made them wait 30 days before they could do the title search on an abandoned vehicle. So there was some confusion there as far as being able to meet those timelines that are set up in abandoned vehicle where the vehicle's towed, and this section of the law for disposition of the vehicle. So on line 2, it says starts out after the time period provided in subsection A, which is 30 days, has expired. The working group added, or within the time requirements provided under 3113-104G for a towing and recovery service. Those timelines in 3113-104G, those are the ones I was just describing, where within 10 days, the title search has to be done, the sheriff in the county where the vehicle was abandoned has to be notified, and notification letters out to the last known owner of record and any lien holder have to be sent within 10 days. So this addition here clarifies when the title search can be done and lets those towing companies get their notices out before 30 days have passed. This piece here, the title searches are conducted by YDOT, and following one section of the law, we're waiting for 30 days before sending title search results. With this added language here that clarifies within statute that for a towing and recovery service, those title searches need to be done right away so that they can fulfill the requirements under this specific 3113-104G that applies to an abandoned vehicle that's towed. That one might be a little confusing with those different timelines under those different situations. So I would, if there are any questions, Mr. Chairman, I would be happy to answer those.
Any questions, fellow senators? Thank you, Ms. Bruckner. Please proceed.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Moving on to page 10, line 10. This requires a description of the vehicle in the notices that are sent to the lien holder and the last known owner of record, and also that are published in the paper advertising the abandoned vehicle sale. It currently requires the make, year, model, license plate, and state indicator. The working group added if available there because there are some circumstances where they may tow a vehicle that's abandoned that doesn't have a license plate on it. And the towing industry had voiced some issues with that in the past where they were questioned on their paperwork if they did not provide a license plate number. So adding if available there would clarify that if there is no license plate, that isn't information that's required in that notice. So just kind of a clarification there for.
I'm assuming that sometimes people will leave a car alongside the road, but they'll take their license plates with them. Is that what's going on?
Mr. Chairman, I believe so. That might be a situation that would be better described by someone from the towing industry who actually experiences that, but they may remove their license plate. They may have not had a license plate. Upon a transfer of ownership of a vehicle now, you can drive for 45 days without a license plate, so long as you have a properly executed title. So if you were in that time period where you weren't required to purchase license plates yet, you may not have them on the vehicle. So there are a few situations that could cause a vehicle that's abandoned not to have a license plate on it.
Okay, thank you. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Moving down on page 10, starting on line 18, that is just another area where required a certified mail be sent, and the working group added return receipt requested at the suggestion of the county clerks. And moving on to page 11, starting at line 5, that is just another area within the law that requires license plate information. And again, the working group just added if available, so that if there is not a license plate on the vehicle, that they aren't expected to provide that information. And moving down then to starting at line 9, subparagraph G, this section of the law is addressing vehicles abandoned on private property. Earlier, we talked about the specified rates for storage and towing for an abandoned vehicle. And the purpose of that is so that the county's abandoned vehicle funds are not diminished. The counties are not required to cover expenses for private property abandoned vehicles under their abandoned vehicle funds. That falls to the property owner in a private property abandoned vehicle situation. And that property owner can recover any expenses that they incurred through the sale of that abandoned vehicle. Currently, in this paragraph, though, it limits the storage fees and the total expenses for an abandoned vehicle to $20 a day for storage, and the total bill can't exceed $760. The towing industry members, the towing association that worked on this group, felt the intent or the purpose for having a limit is so that our county abandoned vehicle funds are not diminished. But this creates a hardship for a private property owner who is disposing of an abandoned vehicle to recover their costs when it's a private property sale. So our working group agreed, the county clerks, the insurance industry, the members of WIDOT that participated on the group, and law enforcement, no one voiced any opposition to removing these limitations on storage fees and the total expenses on a private property abandoned vehicle, because in that circumstance, the county isn't responsible for the expenses, and that private property owner is recovering any expenses they have. If it's a towing company, they have the opportunity to recover their storage, their towing fees, and any other recovery fees they had through the sale of that vehicle. But if they're limited to $760, their tow bill alone may be much higher than that. And that is the reason why the working group suggested to remove that language from the statute.
Okay,
Are there
question?
any questions about that?
Senator Purphy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me clarify this. So if someone abandons a vehicle on your property, then you're saying the county isn't responsible for removing that vehicle and the costs involved? Am I understanding that right?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Furphy, yes, that's correct. If it's abandoned on private property, the county is not responsible for covering those expenses for removal of the vehicle, for the advertising and the notifications of the sale of the vehicle. None of those expenses for a private property abandoned vehicle are the responsibility of the county abandoned vehicle fund. It would be the property owner's responsibility to cover those expenses if they have the vehicle towed. Property owner on a private property situation does have the right to maintain that vehicle on their property through this process and up to the point where they sell it, should they choose to do that.
So, Ms. Bruckner, I'm trying to catch up a little bit here. I think most of the private properties that this piece of the statutes is alluding to would probably include auto repair shops and mechanics, those kinds of folks that the vehicle just simply, they just don't come in and pick it up knowing that they owe all that money to the mechanic. Is that because I can't see it being abandoned out on a ranch somewhere necessarily, because you're in the road right of way. So in a road right of way, that would still be the county's. The county would have to pick that up. Am I right?
Mr. Chairman, yes, that's correct. The right of way would still be considered public property and would be tagged as abandoned and towed by law enforcement to a storage facility where the county had a contract with. However, having been working with storage facilities for several years through my position here at WYDOT, we have had storage facilities complain that people will bring their vehicles and dump them in their yard after hours when they're not open to dispose of them. I'm trying to think of an example. Apartment buildings, for example. Oftentimes people will leave vehicles that maybe don't run anymore. They can't afford to fix them, don't want to mess with them. They'll just leave it in an apartment building parking lot. And so then at some point that apartment building owner needs those spaces. So they'll call a towing company and have that vehicle removed. And that becomes, that's an abandoned vehicle and it was abandoned on private property. The apartment owner chose to have it removed from their parking lot because they need the spaces. We have had instances where people have applied for title searches for abandoned vehicles where they were just left on their property, which seems a little different, but we have had complaints or situations where people abandon vehicle applicants, title search applicants, for abandoned vehicles have indicated that they were just left on their property. And that might be something, a situation where maybe someone from the towing industry could provide some better specific examples of that. That's just been my experience in this position over the years.
No, I think that's a great start, Ms. Bruckner. Thank you. Are we leaving the door too wide open for somebody in a circumstance like that to just charge such an exorbitant fee that there's no way any one of us could afford to retrieve that vehicle at that point? Or how do you determine if I'm that apartment manager and I've had that vehicle towed, how do you determine how much my expense is?
Mr. Chairman, so the expense would likely be the cost of the tow. And
Yeah,
then,
as far as you know, I kept it for 180 days. You see where I'm
yes,
going with that?
Mr. Chairman, yes, I do. And in a private property situation with an abandoned vehicle, that would become, if nobody purchased that vehicle from the private property abandoned vehicle sale, ultimately the property owner or the towing company would go and apply for a title through that process. So removing this limitation could lend itself to excessive fees in that circumstance, which is the reason that you'll notice, Mr. Chairman, starting on line 19 of this same paragraph, the working group addressed that issue and felt that, consistent with the work we did on the lien sales side, not allowing those storage fees to accrue past 180 days, is a reasonable amount of time for the notices to get sent out, for the abandoned vehicle sale to take place, and the vehicle to be disposed of, either through someone purchasing at a sale or through the towing company or the property owner obtaining a title on their own accord because no one bought it from the sale. So this next piece of this revision addresses that issue, Mr. Chairman, and doesn't allow those storage fees to accrue past 180 days. And the towing association members that participated in this felt that was a reasonable response to removing the limitation on the storage fees.
Questions, committee? Okay, Senator McEwen, welcome this afternoon. I told the other senators, Senator McEwen, that I apologize for hanging you guys out a little bit after adjournment today. So anyway, thanks for being here.
Yes,
Question?
sir. Yes, Mr. Chairman. I apologize for being late. I kind of got tied up. One thing I'd like to just add to this, it's been my experience. I have 2 retail places and they'll abandon cars there frequently. I work with the tow companies. They'll come get the car, and if I just let them have it and I don't try to gain title, they don't charge me for the tow or storage. They just come get it and then they take care of it. So I think there's a lot of tow companies that will do that too. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. That helps me. That makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of this part of the world that I've just got to catch up on a little bit. And really appreciate it, Ms. Bruckner. Do you want to please proceed and finish up any thoughts you have on the bill?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. And I would just like to say that this section, this subparagraph, this doesn't have an effect on the department either way. We do the title searches for public property abandoned vehicles, the same as private property abandoned vehicles. This was something that the working group, as a collaborative effort, felt would be helpful. But as it doesn't affect YDOT specifically, and unfortunately not being familiar with the nuts and bolts of the towing industry, again, might be something that someone from the towing association could better address. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I think that we've gotten all the way through it. So I stand for any questions.
We have. Any other overall thoughts on the bill, Ms. Bruckner? Anything to add?
Mr. Chairman, no. I think overall it was a very collaborative working group. we made a lot of progress working through this in a short period of time, and really came to an agreement in a lot of areas. And our county clerks representatives and our insurance industry representatives, towing industry WIDOT, we're all very helpful and provided a lot of input. And it was just a really great experience. It's something that I've worked with for many years here at WIDOT, at least on the title search side of it and the storage facility licensing side of it. And I think it's something that needs to be done to help industry and lien holders and the insurance industry just work through this and have some better clarification.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bruckner. Nice job today. I'm going to ask if you can stick around in case we have a question a little bit later, and see if any of your colleagues, Mr. Rossetti or Director Reiner, if they've got anything to add before we let you guys fade into the background and we'll go to the public. Director Reiner.
We'll let's let Mr. Rossetti go first.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Rossetti, good to see you this afternoon. Thanks for being here. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thanks for having us. I'd really probably defer to Lacey as well. And I think that she pointed out industry's here to speak on this as well. I think can provide some additional clarity for you folks. We're just here to support you if you need something else.
Okay, thank you very much. Director, anything else?
Mr. Chairman, I was just going to really say I do find this personally complex. I mean, when you start peeling this onion back, it does take some study. Would certainly thank Ms. Bruckner for her work and all the elements of industry. You know, from my standpoint, what she says about, hey, WIDOT's very neutral on this, but if it helps the industry, I think that's a good deal for all of us, because there is frustration out there. And so I think from my standpoint, the work that's been done on here is good. And my recommendation is that we pursue down the road of this bill, because it enhances the experience of that industry as they go about their day-to-day business. But that would be it, Mr. Chairman.
Director Reiner, thanks for those comments. And, you know, I have actually, as many times as we get to go back and forth to the Capitol building in what we do in our part-time sitting here, lots of times I probably shouldn't even be out on the road, and I'll see members of this industry, and they are always required to be out there at pretty bad times. And so a lot of times I've kind of tipped my Stetson to those guys on the way by, just like I do all of your troopers. So I'm anxious to hear from industry, and we're going to do that right now. Thank you, Director.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
So Clarissa, we have some good members of our information crew. I see. I'd like to go to public testimony, and would you please let Ms. Wilkinson in, and we'll go on from there.
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Ms. Wilkinson has been admitted to the meeting.
Good afternoon, Ms. Wilkinson. Thank you for being here.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman.
Please give us any thoughts you have on this good Senate File 13.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Catherine Wilkinson. I'm here today representing American Property and Casualty Insurance Association. Mr. Chairman, we were part of the working group led by Ms. Bruckner, and I just want to compliment her for bringing all of us together. It was a very productive working group. And we did have some concerns initially, but we're able to work through it and have no concerns with the bill. We do support the electronic receipt notification amendment that was put in. And Mr. Chairman, I am not an expert in this area, but I'd be happy to stand for any questions, but I may have to defer to Ms. Bruckner, but here to stand in support of the bill.
Any questions for Ms. Wilkinson? Ms. Wilkinson, I have one. Do most of our policies cover if we have to have a vehicle towed to a lot like this? even if it's completely wrecked or whatever might have happened to it and it gets towed to one of these, most of the time we're covered with that, aren't we?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. So a lot of that will be covered in your contract, and towing companies and insurance companies work that out. So these situations here with the abandoned and unclaimed vehicles are a different scenario. And occasionally, if they would have a policy, I believe some of that would cover some of that. But I can follow up on that for sure with you and get back to you.
Well, thank you for that. I just, a circumstance where I get maybe hurt and flown to the hospital and don't even know where they took my vehicle. And it takes me a couple of weeks to get out of the hospital. I would assume that most of our insurance companies would work with somebody in a case like that. No?
Mr. Chairman, yes.
Okay.
Yes, and the towing companies as well.
Okay. Well, Ms. Wilkinson, any other questions, senators? Thank you, Ms. Wilkinson. It's good to see you this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Clarissa, if you trying to see if we've got anyone who is interested in testifying on Senate File 13.
Mr. Chairman, I did receive an email from Brianna Smith, so I would be happy to bring her into the meeting if you would like.
Please do that. Thank you, Clarissa. And while we're waiting for Ms. Smith, I would just say if anyone else is interested in testifying, I would just ask that you please go to the bottom of your screen and put up your little hand if you can, just so that we know to let you into the meeting. We appreciate you all being here. Ms. Smith, thank you for being here. The floor is yours. What can you tell us about Senate File 13?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and the committee. Again, my name is Brianna Smith, and I am the president of the Wyoming Towing and Recovery Professionals. And we're the association here in Wyoming to represent that industry. And as Ms. Breckner mentioned, we have worked really closely with her on this bill. And I will just briefly kind of cover our perspective on the bill, why we asked for the changes, and hopefully address some of the specific questions that came up along the way for you guys. As Ms. Breckner mentioned, I think this is a very complicated, layered body of law. And the reason for that is because there is a number of different ways that a towing company can come into possession of a vehicle. What we found in our experience as a towing industry is that there was really kind of three different sets of statutes that controlled. They overlapped, and in some ways they weren't harmonious, and there was just a lot of loopholes being created that were kind of causing problems overall. So to address the first section of the bill, the majority of the work that we do as towing companies falls under 29-7-101. Anytime we're called out by the Highway Patrol or local law enforcement to do an accident, or if we have a contract with an individual to tow their vehicle. And there's two different scenarios that I'll briefly discuss in there. And one is consensual towing, where we make contracts one-on-one with the customer. And another is what's called non-consensual towing, which is where we are on rotations with law enforcement agencies and they call us out to pick up vehicles, either because the persons are no longer there or been transported to the hospital, or because the person doesn't have anyone in particular that they would like to use to recover their property. To answer a quick question for Senator Furphy, the non-consensual towing rates are not regulated, but what has happened in the industry since the last year or so is that towing companies are required to submit towing rate sheets to the Wyoming Highway Patrol. And the patrol has developed a committee, which we were highly in favor of, to address towing policy regulations, billing regulations, get some uniformities in to deal with disputes. And I feel like that has been a really positive thing for the industry and for WYDOT, because it's really brought an area together where we can start collaborating on billing and fees. And part of my mission, as president of the Towing Association, is to also educate people about the industry, because I think that there's a lot of things that that people don't necessarily understand goes on behind the scenes. So when we get in a vehicle from the Highway Patrol or from a local law enforcement agency, and we know that there's a possessory interest, we know somebody owns that vehicle, it really falls under the 29-7-101 statutes, which is what Lacey referred to as the storage and mechanic lien statutes.
So Ms. Smith,
Yes.
if you, sorry to interrupt, but
No.
I want to go back to the fact that the rates are not regulated, and that's understandable. But when YDOT receives that rate sheet, is there anything that might disallow one of the towing companies from being involved in the rotational piece? That I assume the rotational stuff still goes on with respect to law enforcement, just going down the list, so that we don't favor one towing company over another?
Yes, and there's, I mean, these are things that are kind of in the works. The regulations as they read now, towing companies fill out an application and apply to be on rotation. As part of that application, they have to submit their rates. And as it's working currently, if the patrol has some concern, or if a law enforcement agency has some concern about rates, then they do go back to the towing company to explain their rates, adjust their rates, or justify their rates. On the second side of that, if a customer or someone who's received services disputes the rates, then there is also a process in place through YDOT right now where there's a committee set up to deal with that kind of dispute resolution on the rates.
So Ms. Smith, that's helpful, and you can see where I'm kind of going with that. If Mr. McEwen runs off the road and has a vehicle that's not drivable, the Highway Patrol shows up, helps him call a towing service. If he just happens to be on the wrong spot in the rotational list, he might get the towing company that charges double than the one that just towed somebody about an hour ago. Does that ever happen? Is it pretty consistent across the board with our towing companies?
I would say, and again, this is something in my experience is also regional. So I kind of have a tendency to group the towing companies along the I-80 corridor. They do a different kind of towing. You have major recoveries. At that point, you have multi-vehicle pileups. You have a lot more of the commercial vehicles. Whereas if you go up to, the northern part of Wyoming, if you're in Sheridan and Jackson in those areas, the recoveries have a tendency to be campers and passenger vehicles and things like that. So I think that for the most part, if I compare the services of the region amongst each other, if that makes sense, for the most part, the industry is pretty uniform to my knowledge and to my understanding of what everybody's currently charging. And if there are outliers, again, they can go through that dispute resolution process, and a lot of them do. And I think one of the myths around the towing industry is that there is not, that these bills are high and unreasonable. One of the things that is ongoing consistently happens is constant negotiation with the insurance companies and constant negotiation with the customers. We frequently as an industry reduce bills. There's a number of bills that we don't get paid on. And as Ms. Wilkins explained, with the insurance portion, you asked a question about towing fees. So, but I would like to distinguish that towing fees and insurance policies are only considered fees if you're hooked up and actually transporting the vehicle. What we run into as an insurance agency or as a towing industry is all of the fees that are not when you're hooked up to a vehicle. If you're out cleaning up the carnage of the accident, if you're doing remediation on the side of the road to do dirt or oil spills or gas spills, those kinds of things are generally not covered automatically under insurance policies. They're not considered the towing portion of the policy. So
back to the question regarding rates. I guess
yes.
You're kind of luck of the draw. I mean,
it is. I think it is. I think the towing companies are very generally uniform in their rates. and I think if they happen to get one they disagree with, there is an adequate and working and functional dispute resolution process in place for them. But to my knowledge, the majority of the towing companies are close in rates, and there is kind of an industry norm there.
Okay, thank you for letting me interrupt, and please proceed with thoughts about the bill.
So really what we were trying to accomplish overall, and you guys can certainly, if you have specific questions, is to just separate the situations in which set of statutes would control in which situation. We were having issues. An abandoned vehicle is one traditionally where law enforcement has attempted to contact somebody and track down an owner and hasn't been able to. What we were having difficulty with in the statutes is people that were, having services performed in essentially us taking a lien under the 29-7-101. And the way the statutes were working and reading was if they just waited 30 days and didn't pay their bill, then it kind of slid in under the abandoned vehicle statutes. So what we're trying to do is separate the people who have truly abandoned their vehicles from the people who haven't abandoned their vehicles, know they have a vehicle there, but just have not paid the bill. Part of what was the issue at the beginning is that the abandoned vehicle statutes kind of morphed into issues, in my opinion, with the notice process, and that's why we changed the notice portion of the statutes. As Lacey mentioned earlier on, if we were to go and get a vehicle from the Highway Patrol and bring it in, we were not able to do a title search. And for us, that's critical to find out all of the people interested and to notify everybody that has a potential interest in the vehicle right away. We were having to wait to do that until the 30 days because of the way the statutes read. And then at that point, there was confusion about whether or not it was an abandoned vehicle or whether it was one that fell under the statute or the storage lien statutes. So the notice requirements that we've put in the storage lien statutes are to eliminate that problem so we can let people know right away that we have their vehicle. And we were hoping as an industry too, that would also resolve a lot of the storage disputes. Part of the big storage bills were coming because we didn't have the ability to notify people for this long period of time or until we were ready to do a lien sale. But what we wanted to separate was the ability to notify people and track down people who could pay their bill and pick up their vehicle, and separate that from the lien sale process so that we could just send out notification. What we had asked for, there was two different provisions of notification under 29-7-101. One was a demand letter process where we could just send out demand letters to the interested parties. There was a second optional one where we could borrow from the warehouseman lien statutes and send out notice, but we would also have to advertise. And the clarification that Lacey mentioned in that, saying, as an industry, we asked that it be clear that we're not falling under the warehouseman lien statutes and that we can use the less expensive option that was already provided under the 29-1-101 to do our notifications. So that's where that language came in. I guess, really, like I said, what we're trying to do is just kind of clarify and make sure that everything that we bring in fits an appropriate box. The questions regarding private property tows earlier, again, as a towing industry, generally, in my experience is that a lot of those are apartment complexes. You have a lot of college students here, especially in Laramie, abandoning vehicles, those types of things. The abandoned vehicle statutes traditionally were to help counties keep their counties clean. And traditionally, they're supposed to be tagged by a law enforcement officer, and the law enforcement agency, whether it's the sheriff or the city or the highway patrol, has attempted to contact the owner and can't contact an owner, and then calls in a towing company to come and do those tows. The other issues that they addressed with the title process, Senator Furphy asked about getting titles. We are having a lot of issues about that. And I'll tell you, one of the issues that we had, as the other senator mentioned earlier, is when we do as a towing industry frequently tow abandoned vehicles on private property for free and hope that we can recover our cost out of salvage. what we're running into is that by the time we have to do a title process on that car, the advertising to give everyone notice, the titling fees, and all of that process are winding up being much more than what the salvage value of that vehicle is worth. So it is something that has become pretty chronic in the industry, and that's why we're asking for the things in this bill, like the $2,000 limit, where we can title faster and with less expense if we know it's less than $2,000 and is a junk vehicle, and save some expenses for ourselves in the meantime, to hopefully actually get a recovery on those kinds of situations.
Questions to this point for Ms. Smith? And just as a comment, Ms. Smith, just the cost of advertising alone has really climbed, and it's really it is tough to get the word out.
Yes, sir. I mean, in our experience, salvage at these rates today, salvage is somewhere between $30 and $40 a ton. If you look at an average passenger vehicle, we can sell that to a salvage yard or to salvage for around $100. And the last time I advertised, I think just the advertising expenses were almost $140. And then the certified letters on top of that, and then the titling fees on top of that. So it's certainly generating a loss.
That's a good reminder. Thank you. Further thoughts on the bill? Anything else, Ms. Smith, that you'd like to share with the committee?
No, thank you. Thank you.
Appreciate you being here. Thanks
Yes,
so
thank
much. So Clarissa, maybe we can encourage anyone else who wants to testify on this bill to raise their hands. It doesn't look like, from my vantage point, that we have anyone who wants to. Do you have anybody, Clarissa?
Mr. Chairman, I do not have anyone else who would like to testify, so I believe public comment has concluded.
Okay, and Ms. Smith, if you're going to stick around this afternoon, we may have a question as we work the bill. Would appreciate that.
I certainly will, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to close public comment. Committee, what's your pleasure on this bill?
Sure. I'll move the bill, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, moved by Senator Pappas and seconded by Senator Furphy, and Senator McEwen just barely got beat out by Senator Furphy on that one. So I want to make sure that we spend enough time that if you have any amendments to offer, senators, but I don't know that we really need to go page by page. So any general comments or thoughts on the bill or amendments to the bill? Okay, are you ready for the question on Senator Pappas?
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to mention that since I went through this both in the September and in our November meeting in the interim, it's a bill that's really going to help the industry a lot and provide for dispensing with these vehicles and helping those people out who are caught at the mercy of our current statutes. And so listening to testimony now the third time, I think it's due time that we provide this legislation. So just wanted to put my 2 cents worth in.
Well, thank you, Senator. Senator McEwen, Senator Furphy, it sounds like we're going to be right behind this guy since he has a lot more knowledge on this bill. When you take it out there on the floor, Senator Pappas, we're right behind you.
Yeah, be glad to.
Thank you very much. Okay, so anything else on the bill, senators? Are you ready for the question? Clarissa, would you please call the roll on Senate File 13?
Mr. Chairman, this is a roll call vote for Senate File 13, abandoned vehicles, towing service liens, and titles. Senator Anderson.
Excused.
Senator Furphy.
Aye.
Senator McEwen.
Aye.
Senator Pappas,
Aye.
Chairman Landon.
Aye.
4 ayes, 1 excused.
Okay, thank you, Clarissa. That bill will be ready for committee of the whole when we gather again in March, gentlemen. So let's go to Senate File 9. I know that the director is here this afternoon, and welcome back, Director Reiner. Anxious to get your thoughts and maybe have you walk us through Senate File 9, state employee moving expenses.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. It'd be my pleasure. Again, for the record, Luke Reiner, Director of WIDOT. Chairman and members of the committee, this actually is an issue that's been out there for a while. This was actually an interim bill the prior year, and based on rules during the budget session was not heard last year, and so it has been there for a while. But the current statute that deals with state employee moving expenses basically is in 9-3-104, which is what we're talking about. And what it says is that when any state officer or employee is transferred within the state of Wyoming for permanent duty, when the transfer is made at the request of and for the benefit of the state of Wyoming, the employing agency shall pay the actual expenses of the move. And so for many years, when specifically engineers and troopers within the organization that I direct moved, we would pay their moving expenses. And a couple years ago, that started being denied. And the reason for the denial was basically well, the transfer was not made at the request of and for the benefit of the state of Wyoming. And it seemed to be that it was the change in how we select people for positions. In the old days, somebody might say, hey, Ryan, pack your bags, you're moving to Cheyenne. Or, hey, Ryan, pack your bags, you're moving to Sheridan. And today, we don't do it that way. We say, hey, here's a job opportunity. If you're interested, let us know. And then we'll go through an interview process and we'll select the best person for the job, and off you go. And so that has been basically deemed as for the good of the individual, not the good of the state of Wyoming. And I really fundamentally think that that's had a chilling effect on my organization in terms of the ability for us to do adequate career development, because it's very important that we be able to move our key employees from position to position, and that means from location to location in the state of Wyoming as they develop and mature in their career. And what we've seen is that because moving expenses are not being provided, that we've had really up and coming individuals who need that next experience for the next level of opportunity and the next level of responsibility not apply for that position, because it's the combination of our pay scale, which is too low, and the combination of moving expenses. And then oftentimes, we're asking to uproot a spouse who might be working, and the combination of all of those leads to an individual deciding, hey, I'm not going to pursue that career opportunity. It hurts that person, but I think in the bigger sense, it hurts us as an agency and it hurts us as a state, because as the director of WIDOT, one of my responsibilities that I take fairly seriously is the development of the next generation of leaders. Who's the next chief engineer? Who's the next director? Who's the next colonel of the highway patrol? And are we ensuring that they have the depth and background of experiences as they work through their career, that they can perform the duties that eventually we're going to select them to do? And for me, that's what this is about. Certainly see employees as our greatest asset, and we have a diverse workforce, and I just that fundamentally becomes the issue of, I think we're doing ourselves a disservice as a state by not providing reimbursement of moving expenses, and the trickle down effect is hurting our force. So, Mr. Chairman, that's the background, and with that, I'll walk you through the changes in the bill on Senate File 9. So if you go to page 1, really what you'll see here is that some language is deleted on page 1 through 15, and we inserted the word transfers. So any state employer, or any state officer or employee transfers from one official station to another, the employing agency. And then if you flip it over to the back, what it does is it actually sets up two situations. In Bowlegs I, the first situation that says, hey, you shall pay the actual expenses of transporting the household goods when the transfer is made as a requirement of employment and for the benefit of the state of Wyoming. So that's almost the same language as it used to be, and would cover those times when the transfer is made at, hey, somebody's saying, hey, you're moving. Bowlegs 2 then would be the issue dealing with how most of us now select who goes into the position. And really what it says is, at the discretion of the administrative head of the employing agency, so Director Wydot in our case, may pay an amount not to exceed the amount allowed by the Department of A&I rules for the actual expense or a portion of the actual expenses of transporting the household goods and effects when the transfer results from the employing agency's recruitment of the officer or the employee to a new official station of employment. So that would cover now really the legal interpretation of the rules that says, hey, I did an interview and we selected you for the jobs. It's time for you to move out and continue your career in a position of greater responsibility. There was a lot of discussion when we talked about this in the original committee, which would have been about a year and a half ago at this point, about how much do you pay? And there was some who wanted to set an exact rate, and no more than $5,000 or more than $10,000. And there were some that said, hey, just leave it up to the director. That's what we pay him for. And in the end, what we said was, hey, listen, when you put rates in statute, in the next 10 years, they're obsolete. And so in the end, the recommendation that was adopted by the committee was the language that you see here that says A&I will annually determine what the appropriate amount is that can be reimbursed for somebody when they move. And that would be part of their human resource duties to really publish that and work with that. And so I thought actually that was a good solution, and one that we would certainly support. The other key word there is may. It's not required. And so because certainly there's no additional funding that would come with this. The section 2 then goes on to make it effective, July 1st of this year. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, that really is a quick summary of the bill. I do see it as an important long-term bill for the most important asset that the state has, and that's its employees. And we're certainly happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you, Director. Really well done. Senator McEwen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is, have we thought about if we're going to get into the moving business again, following something like the joint travel regulations or joint transportation regulations that the federal government uses or the military. And instead of setting this on a price, set it on pounds. And then you can set your poundage based on whatever level employee you're moving. For example, executive people would get more pounds than, say, an entry level employee. And then you don't have to worry about time and the price changing in the bill itself. Thank you, sir.
I'm going to go to Senator Pappas, and we'll let you think about that one, Director, and come to you in just a second. Senator Pappas.
Yeah, just some thoughts, because I sat on it last year and we sat on it this last interim as well. And we did, as the director said, we did discuss it at length. And frankly, the language we have, I believe is the best because number one, it doesn't put specifics in the statute, and that's what I want to avoid. Whether it's poundage or whether it's whatever it is, set rates. That's why I think A&I can determine those through rules and regulations, and it will be a different dollar value. I mean, if you're moving somebody from Teton County to Cheyenne, or if it's going to be different than moving them from Douglas to Cheyenne, probably, I would imagine. And so it's going to be different for every specific situation. And I believe that if we really want to build our quality YDOT, whether it's in the highway patrol or whether it's in the department itself, we've always been able to select our leadership from all over the state. And so in order to do that, a lot of times they have to come to Cheyenne to perform some duties, or we'll send them as a district engineer to one of the districts. And I think it's incumbent upon us to actually provide that ability to send that without these families having to worry about those types of expenses. I mean, the active duty military does that all the time. And the key thing is there's not an appropriation for this. Okay, so it's up to the department to pay for it, and the department has told us that this is a tool that they can use to manage their force, and those dollars spent are going to be spent wisely, and will be able to in the long run provide a better department, a better highway patrol force. So I think it's the language we've got now, has been worked a lot, and I think it's appropriate for what we are trying to do.
Thank you, Senator. That's a great overview that saves us a little later from that. Director Reiner, what are your thoughts on that front? And then I'll go to Senator Furphy.
Mr. Chairman, and then really to you, Senator McCune, I completely agree with you. And that's my paradigm after 36 years of military life, is when you move, it's based on poundage and position. And as to what Senator Pappas said, I when A&I produces the rules, I would hope that that's part of in their rule set, but it's specifically not in this bill to provide A&I really the opportunity to set the conditions for us to use, and to set the rules that we're going to use, and to keep it out of the statute, put it in rules and regs. I do see it, just maybe as a further comment to Senator Pappas, as key to our recruiting, key to our retention, key to our ability to keep and retain the best men and women that we can in our force.
Thank you, Director. Senator Furphy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Reiner, I agree with you completely. You've got to have this ability to attract the best people. My question is very simple. Does A&I update those maximum rates on an annual basis? Because that's important. those expenses continue to go up. And so you don't want to be limited to a maximum that's not adjusted often. That's my question. Thank you.
Director Reiner, what can you tell us about A&I rules?
Yep.
On this front?
Mr. Chairman and Senator Furphy, the director of A&I, the director of HRD is with us today and will testify, and I suspect she can talk us through some of those details. When we set this up, I believe today that A&I is not in that business, and that this would establish the requirement for them to issue that guidance. And when we talked about it, our intent would be it was be updated annually. But I would respectfully request we maybe save that question for the director when she.
Director Reiner, I think this is a great time for us to just bring, I think it's Miss Williams. Is that correct?
Yes,
Clarissa, can you maybe bring her
Mr.
in?
Chairman, yeah, Mr. Chairman, that's correct. I will admit her to the meeting now.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Miss Williams.
Good afternoon, Chairman Landon. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you. We can't see you, but we can sure hear you.
Okay, okay, there I am.
Very good. Nice to see you again.
It's nice to see you again.
Thanks for being here this afternoon, Aaron. I'm sure you've been listening in on the conversation. What can you tell us about the development of rules and regs and how diligent we are at staying up on the world with them?
Yeah, A&I, we've promulgated quite a few rules in the past through the official rule promulgation process. You know, one of the things that I'd like to bring up about this policy, I think the policy as is written, we're very comfortable with. Director Reiner has spoken with us throughout the process, and we're very comfortable with entering into this process. My recommendation, though, rather than to put it into an official state rule, would be to put it into a policy or include it as a section in our official statewide compensation policy. And the reason for that is that can be addressed annually through a much easier process than going through the official rules process. And that would kind of be a recommendation I would have. So if something changed, we could address those needs much more quickly and efficiently.
So, Ms. Williams, the language on page 2 then indicates allowed by the Department of Administration and Information rules. Not to exceed the amount allowed by Department of Administration and Information rules. Are you saying that maybe we might want to consider policy instead of rules right there?
You know, that's what I would recommend, just because we'd have the flexibility. You know, we know that the costs are going to change. We'd be able to address those much more efficiently. So I would recommend the compensation policy or a travel policy if we wanted to make a specific policy to address this area.
I wonder, Aaron, if just policy might be good enough to accomplish what you're looking to do. And I appreciate that recommendation. If we just change the word rules to policy, you could end up putting it underneath a couple of places, really.
Yeah, that would really help the Human Resources Division.
Okay, well, thank you. Questions for Ms. Williams and her department at A&I? Thank you, Ms. Williams. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Stand by. Well, Senator McCune, go ahead.
I would actually really support that idea of policy. My issue with the bill as it's written now is we're going to put statutes on the books with an open checkbook and no control. Whereas we could go back to the block grant funding and here's what you got, do with what you need to do with it. I mean, I think that's what we pay the director for. If I'm wrong, please correct me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator McCune, thank you. I do think, Ms. Williams, I think the senator brings up a good point, though. When we're talking about discretionary sorts of things in very tight times, that's my only source of heartburn there, is if we put this in rule or policy, then somebody like Director Reiner has to abide by what you're up to, right? It's not like he can say, you know, we usually give $10,000 on a move, but this year we only give 5,000 because we just don't have the budget. What say you about that?
You know, and I think Chairman Landon, I appreciate that. And that's a concern being in the Human Resources Division we had. There's some agencies who are going to be able to do this and others that may not. And so Director Reiner, I think, addressed it at the beginning of his testimony, the may versus the shall. And I think, you know, we could potentially incorporate in a sliding scale or have some exceptions in there. We always put in a clause in our human resource policies subject to the availability of the agency budget. And so I think we can always include a disclaimer such as that.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. And I'm reading that language again, and Senator Pappas pointed this out before. The director, she may pay an amount not to exceed the amount that is indicated in your policy, Ms. Williams. Senator Pappas, and then I'll go to.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And not only is it a may, it also says for the actual expenses or for a portion of the expenses. So it gives the director a lot of latitude. He's going to have to work under the policy that A&I will prepare, but it gives him a lot of latitude. I mean, it's coming out of his budget. He needs that latitude anyhow. So I think that's good. And I like the idea of changing rules to policy.
Thank you, Senator. Director Reiner.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just going to echo really what's been said here is I, by my job, balance multiple competing priorities every day. And so the language here gives me a lot of flexibility. May, not to exceed. I could say, hey, this year, guys, we're going to pay 60% of what A&I has set as the cap, or we're going to pay 70%, or we're going to pay 100%. Certainly, I think that's my prerogative and my responsibility. And so I think that the language here, you know, really facilitates that to a great degree.
Senator McEwen, that conversation, does that prompt any follow-up questions or thoughts from, good job of picking up on that, you know, kind of led us into that conversation.
I actually really like it. At the end of the day, in all my vast experience as a state senator, I don't like passing bills or legislation that really have no teeth or don't mean anything. And if we're not going to control the funding for these moves, and I'm not suggesting that we should, I don't want anybody to read into that, but if we're not going to control that, I think we're back to the block grant funding. And we say, Mr. Director, we need potholes fixed and we need the roads managed. And this year we have X amount of dollars. Work with A&I if you want to move people. Use WyoDOT people to fill potholes or contract it out. But I don't want to go sit in his office and supervise him. And I'm sure he doesn't want me there either. And he probably knows more than I do. So that's kind of where I was going with this. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You bet. Thank you, Senator. Anything else, committee? Director Reiner and Director Williams, thank you. Really appreciate both of you being here. I want to go to public comment. Clarissa, I do see a couple of folks who maybe would like to comment. Mr. DeCarry is here this afternoon. Maybe he could come first.
Mr. Chairman, he has been admitted to the meeting.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. DeCarry.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the Senate Transportation Committee. It's good to see you all. Mr. Chairman, I'm here today on behalf of the Wyoming Public Employees Association. And the Wyoming Public Employees Association is very supportive of this piece of legislation. In fact, in 2019 at their annual meeting, they passed a resolution, and this is one of the planks in the resolution that they would be supportive of. Mr. Chairman, I think a lot of those points have been made why it's important. I just want to emphasize, this is another method where you can keep trained and skilled employees in the state of Wyoming. We know over the years, we've always said that we're a great training ground. We get to train people, and then they move to somewhere else where they can use that training. This is just one of those that would be another mechanism to keep some of those people here in the state of Wyoming after we've invested all that time and energy in them. So supportive of the bill, Mr. Chairman, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. DeCaria, former Senator DeCaria. It's always good to see you. And I missed the fact that we can't hang out in the hall for a minute or see each other in person, but maybe one of these days soon, huh? Any questions for Mr. DeCaria? Ken, thanks.
Look forward to it, Mr.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Okay, Clarissa, do you show anybody else who would like to testify on this bill? I do not.
Mr. Chairman, you are correct. I do not see anyone else who has raised their hand.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to close public testimony on Senate File 9. What is your pleasure on this bill, committee?
Well, I'll move the bill.
Did you have something first? I'm sorry. Clarissa, did you have something?
Mr. Chairman, I apologize. Tasman Johnson did briefly raise her hand. I know that you did close public comment, though.
No problem at all. We're glad to back up for just a minute. We did not mean to miss her. So please let Tamsin in, and we'll be glad to have her testify on the bill.
Mr. Chairman, she has been admitted to the meeting.
Hello, can you hear me?
Ms. Johnson, we sure can.
I'm sorry, Clarissa, I apologize. I thought by emailing you I was in, so I can see how it works now.
Nice to see you again, Ms. Johnson. Thanks for being here this afternoon.
Yeah, it's great to see everybody. I don't mean to follow so closely on the heels of Ken DeCaria, so I'm not going to confuse all of you. I wanted to testify. My name is Tammy Johnson, and I'm with Wyoming State AFL-CIO. And I just wanted to testify briefly on this bill, again, supporting it, just as you've heard some of the others say. But what I wanted to point out or ask you to think about carefully is, having been a state employee myself and subject to the different whims of different supervisors and different agencies, there's a level of fairness at play when one agency says, well, we're going to pay your full moving expenses. And then another agency may say, well, we can't, so we're not going to. And I think these things are better housed at the state level, at the Department of A&I, where a system is worked out for how much each person who's moving gets, not based on their seniority, not based on whether they're an executive. I think probably if you're of the age where you're working, you have as much crap to move as anyone else does. And so it doesn't matter if you're an executive, if you're an entry-level person, you probably have a lot of stuff to move. And so what we would be trying to do, as all of you have said, is to ease the burden on the employee who's being asked to move, or who's, changing their lifestyle so that the state can retain great employees. So I'd ask you to think about it in that context, from an element of fairness. How do you make sure that people who work in different agencies for the state get the same level of support when they have the opportunity to move up in the ranks, to stick around, stay with the state, and do the good work? So I just ask you to consider that, and I will appreciate any questions that you have.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Senator Pappas.
Thank you. Good to see you, Tammy.
Thanks.
The issue here, though, to what you're speaking about, gives the directors of these departments, though, the ability to make that call, though. So the word may is in there, and it's not required them to pay any moving expenses if they don't want. So there may be still some inherent inequality, but I think that's I think it's got to be may rather than a shall, and requiring directors to start paying these things. because it's coming out of their budget. We're giving them the authority. There's a reason why they're the director of the department. And so I understand what you're trying to get at, but this particular statute gives the choice to the director.
So, Ms. Johnson, thoughts on that? I'm sure it's something we could keep an eye on as we go forward. At least it puts this thing in place.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, certainly. And Senator Pappas, I appreciate those comments. Having been a state employee, I hate to admit that I've witnessed, disparate treatment among employees, even within an agency. And if one is not quite as favorable as another employee, they may receive a different benefit. And so I would hope there was some way to safeguard that so that an employee wouldn't have to pursue some kind of a grievance action or something when it was just a matter of, do we do this or not? Do we help people move or do we not help people move? If we do, we do. And if we don't, then we don't. It's hard to think about the state as one entity, but that's what we're talking about. We're talking about people who are public servants who work for the state. And why would it make a difference which agency I work for, whether or not my moving expenses are paid? I think that's an issue at the state level that says we want to keep good employees in our state. We want our kids to come back. We say that all the time. We want to keep good employees. So I know the may and shall. I'm not advocating for either of those, but I am hopeful that something can be built into the bill that would say, we're going to make sure that it doesn't matter who you work for. You're going to get, if you're going to move for your agency, then you're going to get your moving expenses paid. And, not based on whether you're an executive or you're an entry level, because those expenses don't change whether you're an executive or an entry level. They're still expensive. And in fact, an entry level person makes less money than an executive. So they would have a greater need to have that kind of financial support. So anyway, I appreciate your comments. I understand what you mean. And I just wanted to share those thoughts with you.
Good thoughts. Thank you, Ms. Johnson.
Yep,
I'm sure that Ms. Williams is taking some notes, and hopefully through that rules and reg process, some of these things could be ironed out or at least considered. Senator Pappas.
Yeah, I was going to about say what you were going to say, Senator Landon. Actually, I don't know if it's a rule and reg process, but through the policy process. So that they would have to set some policies that directors will have to, make their decisions based on. And frankly, if they violate those policies, yeah, maybe it will come to a grievance. But I still think we need to give that latitude to the directors. And really, that any of those moves have to be for the benefit of the state, the benefit of the organization. And it may be YDOT, it may be Game and Fish, who knows who it may be. But there is a certain limit to how you're going to do that. Every employee that moves in the state is probably not going to get their expenses paid for. Half the time they're doing it for their own purposes. They're moving, right? And so it's the intent that the director make that decision. And so it's got to be made.
Yeah.
Thank you, Senator. Ms. Johnson, thank you. Senator McKeon.
I would also like to add, we're kind of dealing with a double-edged sword. As I'm listening to earlier, we want to use this sort of as a negotiation tool to hire people or to advance people. And most frequently in the private sector, that negotiation process is between the supervisor and the employee. And some negotiate better than others, unfortunately. And I do think there's a process if the system's abused. And if we're not getting the results out of that process, we need to look at that and make sure it works also. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Anything else for Ms. Johnson? Tammy, it's good to see you. Thank you for being here this afternoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the committee.
Clarissa, let's make sure that Ms. Smith or Ms. Bruckner, I think they were here for the other bill, but I'm just looking to make sure this time. I don't have anybody if you don't either.
Mr. Chairman, I don't have anyone either. I would be happy to bring them in if you'd like, and we can chat with them to see if they'd like to provide any comment, but
I don't see a hand raised, and so I think we're not going to put them on the spot. So I think we're good now. Committee, thank you for your patience to back up for a minute. Didn't mean to overlook Ms. Johnson. Now I'm going to close public comment and would entertain a motion on the bill. Senator McKim.
One quick question. Are we going to change the language to policy?
I'm going to give that opportunity, Senator. In order for us to work the bill, we kind of need a motion and a second, and then we can go into the bill and do some work if we'd like. So
I'll move the bill then.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman.
Been moved. Is there a second? Seconded by Senator Pappas? So let's work the bill, committee. Anything on page 1? Any proposed changes on page 1? How about page 2? Senator Pappas.
Yeah, I propose on line 13, we strike the word rules and substitute policy. Policies, plural, excuse me.
Okay. I'm not requiring a second on amendments, so I think discussion on that one. Does everybody know? Senator Furphy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I'm confused, the difference between rules and policies. In my world, as in the business world, the policy is often unchangeable. Whereas if you have rules, you can change those rules as often as you need them. So I would like the more experienced legislators to help me out with that issue.
You know, Senator Furphy, that's an interesting thought. I hadn't really gone there, and I'm going to give Senator Pappas a moment also, but I'm trying to think of my 30 years in a state agency, and it seems as though policies were pretty flexible as well. I see them as more of a pamphlet that's handed out, and this is what our travel policies are, that sort of thing. But good points made. Rules and regs, they feel like to me that they're a little more binding. But Senator Pappas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, it's opposite of what you had mentioned, Senator Furphy, in at least in my few years in the legislature. Rules and regulations are a formal process that we have to go through. The formulation of rules, the comment period, the advertisement, the taking public testimony before any of these rules can be put in place. But policy is something that, for instance, YDOT, their transportation committee can set certain policies to govern YDOT. And so it's opposite of what you're thinking, or of maybe what you have experienced, but rules and regulations are much, much formal, and they require a long time to develop, which means they can't change as easily as a policy can change. So I think it's opposite.
Thank you, Senator. And rules have to be promulgated through a administrative procedures process, and much more convoluted. I do think that maybe policies are a little bit more limited. So does that clarify a little bit, Senator Furphy? Does that help, I hope?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. As Senator Pappas noted, it's opposite in the business world. So That helps me understand. Thank you.
Okay, and I'm just double checking that language, Senator Pappas. I think it's one word, changing rules to policy.
Policies, Mr. Chairman, plural.
Policies, plural.
Yeah.
And are you ready for the question on the amendment? And then Senator McCune, I want to make sure that you don't have something else on page 2. We'll come back to you. All in favor of Senator Pappas's amendment, please raise your hand to the screen. Is there anyone opposed? Okay, that amendment passes, Clarissa. Senator McEwen, any other thoughts on page 2?
No, I think I'm good with it now.
Okay. Senator Furphy, anything else on page 2? Senator Pappas? Okay, I think we're good to go. Section 2, Section 3 is just the effective date. 2 and 3 are effective immediately, and that's the end of the bill. Are you ready for the question? Okay, Clarissa, would you please call the roll on Senate File 9?
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, this is a roll call vote for Senate File 9, State Employee Moving Expenses. Senator Anderson.
Excused?
Senator Furphy.
Aye.
Senator McEwen.
Aye.
Senator Pappas.
Aye.
Chairman Landon.
Aye.
4 ayes, 1 excused.
Okay, committee, we'll draw straws when we get to March on this one. Really good debate on that one, and I think we landed that in an even better place. So this is the last meeting committee that we will have. It looks like tentatively the schedule the week of February the 22nd has the Senate Transportation Committee meeting on Thursday morning, which would be, I think, the 25th. That has not been approved formally by the Management Council, but I expect that to hold. I'm sorry I don't know the schedules for the other committees that we might be serving on, but transportation is 8 to noon on the 25th. It's my intention to take up those bills that we are aware of that may take a little bit more testimony and time. Don't have them in front of me, but certainly the camera bill is one that we will take up. I'll be in touch with you guys to let you know. So any other thoughts for the good of the cause? I'll stay on with Clarissa and make sure she got our amendment and other duties as assigned. Anything else? Senator Pappas.
Mr. Chairman, did you say we're going to meet as a Senate committee and not a joint committee?
It is my understanding is same setup the week of February 22nd as it was the week prior to this 8-day session, if that makes sense. So we'll have our 4 hours together to consider those 2 or 3 bills that we've talked about, and look forward to it. A couple of those bills, I held them till that week on purpose, gentlemen, just because I think they're a little heavier lift. And we want to make sure we get them right if we're going to take them out. So, okay, gentlemen, thank you for your indulgence today. Sorry to hold us up this afternoon. Appreciate you all jumping back.